So, before we get into this, I want you to understand something. This is not a ghost story. This is not a fairy tale. What I'm about to tell you is a real case, a real man, a real investigation, and a real ending that, even now, nobody has been able to fully explain. So, November 14th, 1997, Edinburgh, Scotland. A cassette tape is found inside a desk drawer. The drawer belongs to a man named Dr. Elliot Marsh, psychiatric investigator, 38 years old. And the reason somebody else is going through his desk is because Dr. Elliot Marsh was found dead that morning. Sitting at his desk, no signs of struggle, no signs of forced entry. The official cause of death was cardiac arrest. And on paper, that should have been the end of it, except for one thing. The cassette tape found in his drawer had 3 words written on the label. And those 3 words were, "Don't play this." But somebody did play it. And what was on that tape is what I'm going to tell you about today. Now, to understand what's on the tape, we have to go back about 8 months. Back to when Dr. Elliot Marsh was very much alive and working on what would become the most disturbing case of his career. So, March 1997. Dr. Marsh receives a referral from a local GP in Edinburgh. The patient's name is Agnes Cole, 67 years old, retired school teacher. And when Agnes walks into Dr. Marsh's office for the first time, the first thing he notices is that she is wearing her absolute best clothes. Her Sunday best. And he would later write in his personal notes that it seemed like she wanted to be taken seriously before she even opened her mouth. And so Agnes sits down across from him and she says, "I am not a woman who imagines things, doctor. I taught mathematics for 31 years. I deal in facts." And then she tells him what's been happening to her. She says that starting in October, she began seeing faces, and not just vague, blurry shapes. She's talking about detailed, specific faces, hovering above her in the dark, and she describes them as having large teeth, eyes that were far too wide, ears that stretched out sideways, and the overall shape of each face was horizontally elongated, like someone had taken a normal human face and just stretched it sideways. She said it looked like something designed by a person who had only ever heard a description of a human face but had never actually seen one. And then Agnes reached into her bag and she slid a piece of paper across the desk toward Dr. Marsh. She said, "I drew them," and Dr. Marsh looked at that drawing. And he would later record on his tape that he felt cold looking at it, not because it was frightening, but because it was accurate. Every detail she had described was right there on that paper exactly as she had said it. Now, Dr. Marsh's official diagnosis for Agnes Cole was something called Charles Bonnet syndrome. It's a condition where deteriorating vision causes the brain to basically fill in the gaps by generating its own images. Textbook condition, clean explanation, and on the surface, that should have been enough. But Dr. Marsh could not stop thinking about one specific thing, because Agnes Cole was case 1. And several weeks later, when he reviewed the file from case 4, a completely different patient, different age, different background, no connection to Agnes whatsoever, he found a sketch that patient had drawn of what they had seen. And it was the same face, same teeth, same stretched mouth, same everything. And so Dr. Marsh wrote in his personal log that night. He said, "These cases have no connection, no shared history, no shared geography, and yet, same face." So now we move forward to February 1997. And this is where things start to get a lot darker. Dr. Marsh conducts a home visit. The patient's name is Thomas Vane, 29 years old. And when Dr. Marsh arrives at Thomas's flat in Edinburgh, he immediately notices that the curtains are drawn shut even though it's the middle of the day. And the room smells like grief, because Thomas Vane's mother had died 14 months earlier. Pancreatic cancer, 11 days from diagnosis to burial. And Thomas had not left this flat in 6 weeks. So Thomas sits on the edge of his bed and he looks at Dr. Marsh and he says, "It was 3 in the morning. I wasn't asleep. I want you to understand that. I was completely awake." And then he pauses, and he looks over at his bedroom doorway, and he just kind of stares at it for a moment. And then he says, "The floor started creaking, just outside the door. 1 step, then another, and then he stops again." Dr. Marsh asks him to take his time, and Thomas says, "She was standing there, my mum, exactly as I remembered her, before the illness, before all of it. She was just watching me, not smiling, not speaking, just watching. Like she was making sure I was still breathing." And then his jaw tightens and he says, "I screamed, 'God forgive me.' I screamed at my own mother." Now, Dr. Marsh's clinical explanation for Thomas Vane was grief hallucination. Common condition, Well documented. Happens to people who have lost somebody close to them. And again, on paper, that should have been a clean enough answer. But there was one detail that Dr. Marsh could not explain away. And that was the sound. Thomas had heard the floor creaking before he saw anything. And the thing about hallucinations is that they are purely visual. They do not make sound. They do not cause floorboards to creak at 3 in the morning. And so that night, Dr. Marsh recorded in his personal log. He said, "I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Thomas Vane's floor, about the sound of footsteps that shouldn't exist." And then after a long pause on the tape, he says, "My own mother has been dead for 3 years. I have never once seen her." And then very quietly, he says, "I think I am almost disappointed." So now we jump ahead to April 1997, and this is case 6. The patient's name is Raymond Cole, no relation to Agnes Cole. Raymond is 44 years old, truck driver, and when Dr. Marsh meets him, he's sitting in a hospital bed with his left arm bandaged from an accident that happened on the A702 highway, 3 miles outside Edinburgh. Midnight, no other vehicles on the road. And Raymond looks at Dr. Marsh and he says, "I hadn't slept properly in 2 days, no coffee that night either," which was stupid, criminally stupid. He says he was drifting in and out of consciousness behind the wheel, and then suddenly, he was back, fully awake, because something was standing in the middle of the road directly in the path of his truck. And he describes it like this. He says, "It was black, completely black, not dark clothing, black like an absence, like someone had cut a human-shaped hole out of the world." So Raymond swerves, nearly goes into the ditch, manages to stop the truck, and then he looks in his mirror, and the figure is still there, standing in the middle of the road, just looking at him. And so Raymond does something that he himself admits was completely idiotic. He gets out of the truck, and he walks back toward the figure, and when he gets there, nothing. Empty road, empty night, just him and his own breathing. And Raymond says, "But I wasn't tired after that. I was absolutely, perfectly, terrifyingly awake." Now, the clinical explanation here is straightforward. Sleep deprivation causes the brain to manufacture stimulation in order to force the body into a state of alertness. The black figure was Raymond's brain doing exactly that. Logical, scientific. But here's what Dr. Marsh noted in his file that he could not explain. 2 other cases, completely unrelated patients, different cities, different years, had described the exact same figure, same shape, same total absence of color, same feeling of being watched. And so Dr. Marsh recorded this on his tape. He said, "I've started locking my office door when I review these files. I don't know why." So now we get to case 8, and this one is different from the others, because Dr. Marsh didn't find this patient. He went looking for her. Her name is Nora Hale, 34 years old, single mother, works 2 jobs, and the kind of tired she carries around isn't the kind you fix with a good night's sleep. So Nora sits down at her kitchen table across from Dr. Marsh. There's a cup of tea in front of her that she never touches, and she tells him what happened. She says she was driving home late one night from her second job, 40-minute drive, and she felt herself starting to fall asleep behind the wheel. So she pinched herself, shook her head, opened the window, anything to stay awake, and then she heard giggling, coming from the back seat. And Nora looked in the rearview mirror, and her 3-year-old son was sitting in the back seat, looking right at her, laughing, but her son was at home, with a babysitter, 14 kilometers away. So Nora slammed on the brakes, turned around, empty seat, and then 10 seconds later, her phone rang. It was the babysitter. Her son had fallen down the stairs, at the exact same moment she had seen him in the mirror. The exact same moment. And Dr. Marsh wrote one word in his notes after that interview. Coincidence. And then he crossed it out. So now we get to case 10, and this patient is a 19-year-old university student named Marcus Webb. And Marcus sits across from Dr. Marsh and he's nervous, talking fast. And he tells him about a family holiday he'd taken to a rural resort in the middle of nowhere. He says he saw a girl, standing in a second-floor window, just staring down at him. He waved at her. She didn't react at all. And then later that same day, he saw her again, near the tree line behind the resort, just standing there, completely still, staring at him. So Marcus starts walking toward her. And the closer he gets, the more he realizes something is wrong with her face. He says he can't describe it exactly, but something about her eyes and her mouth was making his brain scream at him to stop walking. But he kept going anyway, and then about halfway there, she turned around and ran full speed into the woods and disappeared. Marcus didn't see her again for the rest of the trip, but then on the drive home, miles and miles away from the resort, Marcus glances out the window, and the same girl is standing on the side of the highway, and as the car speeds past her, her head slowly turns, tracking him through tinted glass, through distance, through everything. He asked his parents if they saw her. They said, "Saw who?" And before Marcus left his session, Dr. Marsh asked him one question. He asked what specifically was wrong with the girl's eyes. And Marcus said, "They were completely black, not dark brown, black, like two holes." And that detail, those black eyes, Dr. Marsh had heard it before, in other cases, from people who had never met Marcus Webb and never would. So now we get to case 11, the last one. And this is the one that Dr. Marsh would say in his tape affected him the most. The patient's name is Claire Donovan, 19 years old, Edinburgh University student, and she sits across from Dr. Marsh completely still, not because she's calm, but because her body still remembers what it felt like to be unable to move. She tells him she'd had sleep paralysis 3 times before, and she says, when you've had it before, you know how it works. You know it ends, you just wait it out. But this time was different. She says she opened her eyes and the morning light was coming through the blinds and she could not move. Not even her fingers, just her eyes, and standing against the wall of her bedroom was a little girl. Maybe 8 years old, completely still, and her eyes were black, not dark brown, not dilated, black, like 2 holes in her face. And then the little girl started walking toward her, but not normally. She was taking these giant, exaggerated steps, stretching her legs further than legs should be able to stretch. And she reached the bed, and she put both hands around Claire's throat, and squeezed, and Claire says, "I could not breathe." Not in a dream, in reality. I genuinely could not draw air into my lungs. And then she looks directly forward and she says, "What I remember most is just watching it happen, feeling her hands, feeling my lungs collapse, and being completely, totally unable to do anything at all." And then she asked Dr. Marsh, "Does that ever get better?" And Dr. Marsh told her yes. He lied. So now we get to the tape. The actual tape found in Dr. Marsh's desk drawer the morning his body was discovered. And this final recording was made on November 13th, 1997, the night before he died, at 3:33 in the morning. And the Dr. Marsh on this recording does not sound like a psychiatric investigator anymore. He sounds like a man who has run out of explanations. He says, "I understand now why they all came to me. Not because they wanted a diagnosis, because they wanted someone to tell them they weren't alone." And then after a pause, he says, 8 months, 11 cases, 11 different people, and science explained every single one of them away." And then his voice gets very quiet. And he says, "But science could not explain why they all saw the same face. It could not explain why Raymond's black figure matched the one in Claire's bedroom. It could not explain why Marcus Webb's girl had the same black eyes as what Thomas Vane saw standing in his doorway." And then there's a long silence on the tape, 5 full seconds. And then Dr. Marsh says, "There is a little girl standing in the corner of my office." And then he says, "She has been there for 11 minutes. And then the sound of a chair slowly sliding back across the floor. And he says, "I know what this is. I wrote the clinical definition myself." And then, "But she is not moving." And then very quietly, almost to himself, he says, "And hallucinations don't cast shadows." And then the recorder hits the floor, and there are 2 footsteps. And then there is nothing, just static. Now, the police report filed the following morning lists the cause of death as cardiac arrest. Dr. Elliot Marsh, age 38, no history of heart disease, no signs of struggle, no signs of forced entry. 11 case files open on his desk, and the investigating officer, a detective inspector named Susan Hare, noted one additional detail in her report. She said that all 11 patients from Dr. Marsh's files were contacted after his death, and all 11 of them reported the same thing, that on the night of November 13th, they had woken up at exactly 3:33 in the morning and seen a man standing in the corner of their room, just watching them. None of them had ever met Dr. Elliot Marsh in person. The case was officially closed. The cassette tape was filed away as evidence, and the drawer it came from has never been opened again.